My name is Maribelle Kinsley, and I am 88 years old. People look at me now. My silver hair tucked neatly under a sun hat, my long skirts swaying as I walk the grounds of the Kinsley Home for girls, and they see peace. They see grace. They see a woman who has lived a full life. They have no idea that for 70 years, my heart was hollow. That I carried the weight of 1,000 secrets every time I smiled for a photograph or shook a donor's hand. That every safe bed I've built for these girls was born out of nights when I had none. It was last month, on the day we broke ground on our third shelter, that a reporter asked me, "Mrs. Kinsley, what made you decide to dedicate your golden years to this cause?" I smiled for the camera, but my throat tightened. Because the truth wasn't pretty. It wasn't polite. And it certainly wasn't the kind of answer you give for a magazine feature. The truth was that when I was a teenager, the people I trusted most didn't just fail me, they destroyed me. I still remember the day it happened, the day that carved a hole in me so deep that nothing could fill it for decades. I remember the wallpaper in the hallway, the way the sunlight was blocked out by the curtain. I remember the smell, cigarettes and something sour, something rotten. And I remember the sound of the door locking. For years I told myself it was just one day, just one moment. But it wasn't. It bled into everything. Into the way I loved. Into the way I raised my children. Into the way I hid from mirrors. The people who should have protected me didn't. And the people who hurt me were welcomed at our dinner table, year after year, as if nothing had happened. I stayed silent. For decades. Until the day I walked past an abandoned building on the south side of town, a crumbling rat-infested house, and saw a girl sitting on the steps, knees drawn to her chest, her eyes as empty as mine had once been. That was the day something in me shifted. But before I could build anything for her, I had to tear down the walls I'd built inside myself. And that meant telling the story I'd buried for 70 years. Even if it meant naming names. Even if it meant losing the last of my family. The groundbreaking ceremony applause faded, and I looked out at the crowd, at the faces that thought they knew me. It was time. But I wasn't going to start in the present. I was going to take them all back, to the exact day my life split in two. And when you hear who was waiting behind that locked door, you'll understand why I can't stop now. If you believe some stories deserve to be told no matter how much time has passed, stay with me. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed, because the next chapter is the one I've never dared to say out loud until now. I've learned at 86 that memories are not fixed things. They are slippery creatures, changing color depending on the light you hold them under. When I was 13, I told myself that summer was just strange. Now, when I hold it up to the light of who I am today, I see it for what it was. The first summer I stopped feeling safe in my own skin. The house I grew up in wasn't grand, but it was neat. White clapboard siding, a front porch with peeling paint, and 2 rocking chairs that had been there longer than I'd been alive. My mama loved the porch. Said it made us look like the kind of family people trusted. I used to sit out there in the evenings, barefoot, snapping beans into a dented metal bowl, listening to the hum of cicadas. Daddy would be inside reading the paper. Mama humming in the kitchen. I thought those were the sounds of home. Thought they were safe. Now when I close my eyes I know better. The first time the air changed it was subtle. It was late June. The day had been hot enough to make the tar on the road soft and sticky. I was upstairs in my room, reading the same tattered library book for the 3rd time because the library didn't get new shipments in the summer. I heard a knock, 3 slow raps against my door. It was my Uncle Warren. He wasn't really my uncle, just Mama's cousin, but everyone called him Uncle. He'd been staying with us for a few months after falling on hard times. That's how Mama put it. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with a smile that showed too many teeth. People liked him, said he was charming. He had a way of making you feel like you were the only one in the room. First I liked that. At 13, being noticed felt like a gift. He came into my room that day without waiting for me to say, "Come in." Sat down on the edge of my bed like it was his own. "What you reading, Belle?" he asked. "Just a book," I mumbled, keeping my finger in the page. He leaned closer. Too close. A girl as pretty as you should be reading love stories, he said. That sentence. It didn't feel right, but I didn't have the words to explain why. I just laughed nervously and tried to change the subject. That summer, he found little reasons to be near me. Passing me in the hall and brushing my shoulder. Standing behind me when I washed dishes. Letting his hand linger a second too long when he handed me something. I told myself I was imagining it. Because the alternative, that someone my mama trusted was watching me differently, was too heavy to hold. I'm telling you all this now because for 70 years, I let those memories sit in the dark. I convinced myself they weren't important. That they didn't define me. But they did. They shaped the way I stood, the way I dressed, the way I spoke. They shrank me. The worst day came in August. Mama had gone to town for groceries. Daddy was working late. The heat was so thick it felt like you could chew it. I was alone in the house with him. I remember I was in the kitchen, pouring sweet tea into a glass, when he walked in and shut the door behind him. That sound, the latch clicking into place, still makes my stomach turn. He said something about me blossoming. Said I reminded him of Mama when she was younger. Then he stepped forward and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like my whole body froze. I don't need to tell you the rest. You can feel it, can't you? That slow suffocation, that certainty that you have nowhere to run. When Mama came home, I didn't say a word. And here's the part I've wrestled with for decades. She looked at me once, really looked, and then looked away. Think she knew. But in our house, knowing and speaking were two different things. Speaking was dangerous. Speaking meant tearing apart the picture she wanted the world to see. So I stayed silent. I learned to smile with my lips closed. To keep my hands busy so no one would notice they were trembling. I learned to answer "I'm fine" before anyone could ask how I was. Even after Uncle Warren left that fall, the damage stayed. It was in the way my shoulders curled forward, the way my laugh got quieter, the way I stopped looking people in the eye. And no one noticed. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't want to know why. When I think about it now, at 86, sitting in my little apartment with the hum of the refrigerator behind me, I can still taste that summer. Not in the sweetness of watermelon or the salt of sweat on my brow, but in the metallic tang of fear. The thing about fear is it doesn't just leave when the person who caused it walks out the door. It becomes a part of you. You carry it into every room, every relationship, every decision. It sat beside me at my high school graduation. It walked me down the aisle on my wedding day. It rocked my babies to sleep with me at 3 in the morning. For decades, I told myself I had left it behind. But the truth is, I just learned to dress it up so it wouldn't scare other people. That's why I'm telling it now. Because silence is a seed, and it grows things you don't want in your garden. And I've had enough of weeds. The last time I saw Uncle Warren was in 1968. I was 30 years old, married with 2 children. He showed up at a family reunion, heavier, grayer, still smiling that same smile. People clapped him on the back, poured him sweet tea, asked him about his health. No one looked at me to see that my hands had gone cold. No one noticed me leave early. I kept my silence even then. But that day something shifted. I realized that the people who had protected him weren't just the ones who didn't believe me. They were the ones who never asked. And that's why, sitting here now, I know I can't just tell this story for myself. I have to tell it for every girl who sat in a kitchen with the door latched, every girl who swallowed the words because the truth would make too many people uncomfortable. The work I'm doing now, building safe homes for girls, is my way of taking back that summer. Brick by brick, I'm replacing what was taken from me. And I will not stop until every girl in my care knows that when she says, "This happened," someone will believe her. I can feel my younger self watching me sometimes. She's sitting on that porch, barefoot, snapping beans into a dented bowl. This time when she looks up, I'm there. I take the bowl from her hands. I tell her, "You're safe now. I've got you." And I do. For the first time in 70 years, I really do. I sometimes think my life could be laid out like a quilt, patches sewn from years of pretending, years of getting by, years of smiling without ever letting the smile reach my eyes. From the outside it might look beautiful. People see the colorful squares, my wedding day, the birth of my children, Sunday picnics by the lake. But if you look close, you can see the uneven stitches, the spots where the fabric frays because I was holding it together with thread too thin to last. I married young. 18. His name was Marshall. He was kind, or at least he tried to be. He had strong hands and a soft way of speaking when we were alone. But I never told him the truth about that summer. I didn't know how. When you grow up being taught to keep certain things locked inside, you learn how to turn the key without even realizing you're doing it. On our honeymoon, he touched my face and said, "You've got the saddest eyes I've ever seen, Belle. Even when you smile." I laughed and told him I was just tired from the wedding. And just like that, the first brick in the wall between us was laid. For years, I thought if I just loved my children enough, the past would lose its grip on me. That being a good mother would somehow undo what had been done. We had 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, and I poured myself into raising them. I was there for every first step, every school play, every scraped knee. I baked their favorite pies for birthdays, sewed their Halloween costumes, stayed up all night when fevers came. I gave them everything I had. But I never gave them the truth. The thing about silence is it doesn't just protect the person who hurt you. It shapes the way you move through the world. When my daughters came to me with problems, I listened, I comforted them. But I never told them that danger can live inside your own family, that the hands you trust can be the same ones that harm you. I told them to be careful of strangers, but not of the people who wore familiar smiles. And for that, I will always feel some measure of guilt. Marshall died young, 49, a heart attack in his sleep. One moment I was folding laundry in the living room. The next I was shaking him, begging him to wake up, calling for help that would come too late. In the days after his funeral, I felt like the world had gone quiet. My children needed me, and I tried to be strong for them. But in the stillness of night, lying alone in that big bed, the memories I had kept locked away started to rattle the door. I began to see Warren's face in the shadows of the hallway. I heard the click of that latch whenever I closed my eyes. And I hated myself for still being afraid. Decades later, with children grown and a husband buried, I was still that 13-year-old girl, frozen in a kitchen with nowhere to run. There were moments, though, when I thought about speaking. When my children would bring their friends home, and I'd watch them all laughing in the living room, I'd think, this is when you tell them. You tell them now so they'll know the signs. So they won't be fooled by the smiles. But the words never came. The fear wasn't just of being called a liar. It was of changing how they saw me. Of letting them know their mother had once been powerless, had been hurt in ways that could never be undone. I couldn't bear the thought of them looking at me with pity, so I stayed quiet. The years passed, and my children had children of their own. I became Grandma Belle, the woman who always had cookies in the jar, who knitted blankets for every new baby, who sat in the front pew at baptisms and clapped the loudest at school plays. No one knew that in the quiet moments, I was still stitching patches over a wound that never fully healed. When Warren died, I think it was in the late 80s, my mother called to tell me. She spoke like she was giving me the weather report. Warren passed. Heart failure. They'll bury him Friday. I remember sitting there, holding the phone, waiting for some acknowledgement. Some sign that she knew what his death meant to me. But there was nothing. Just, "You coming to the service?" I told her no. She didn't ask why. That's when it hit me. No one in my family had ever wanted to know my truth. Not because they didn't believe me, but because believing me would require them to change everything. And change was too costly. It meant admitting they'd failed to protect me. It meant confronting the fact that the man they'd welcomed into their homes, fed at their tables, and prayed with in their churches was a predator. That realization was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because I understood that the people I had relied on were never going to be the ones to help me heal. Liberating because it meant I didn't have to keep waiting for them to give me permission to speak. The turning point came 20 years ago. I was volunteering at a youth shelter in town, just helping with meals, folding laundry, handing out blankets. One night I was cleaning up after dinner when I overheard a girl, couldn't have been more than 14, telling one of the staff members, "It was my mom's boyfriend." She doesn't believe me. Froze. The plate in my hand went cold. Her voice cracked in exactly the same way mine had the one time I tried to tell my mother. And I realized nothing had changed. Girls were still being silenced. Still being told to be good and keep their mouths shut. I went home that night and took out a box from the back of my closet. Inside was an old spiral-bound notebook, the one I'd kept hidden under a loose floorboard in my room when I was 13. My diary. Page after page I had written about Warren. About the way he looked at me, the things he said, the times I tried to avoid him. I hadn't written everything. Some things were too raw even for the page. But it was enough. Enough to prove I hadn't imagined it. Enough to make anyone reading it understand exactly what had happened. For the first time in decades, I read it cover to cover. My hands shook. My throat ached. But by the time I closed it, I knew. I wasn't going to leave this world without telling the truth. It's funny the way deciding to speak changes you. I didn't tell anyone right away. I wasn't ready for the stares, the whispers, the disbelief. But inside I felt something uncoil. Like I could finally stand up straight after years of hunching my shoulders. I started writing again, not just in that old diary but in new notebooks. I wrote letters to my younger self. I wrote out every memory I could recall, even the ones that still made me flinch. And slowly, I began to imagine what it would be like to say those words out loud. Now, all these years later, I've decided where I'll start. Not in a courtroom. Not in a newspaper. In my own living room surrounded by my family. My children, my grandchildren, even the great-grandchildren. I'll tell them who I really am and what really happened. I'll put the diary on the table and let them read my 13-year-old handwriting for themselves. And when they ask me why I waited so long, I'll tell them the truth. 'Cause no one ever asked. And because I didn't know I was allowed. The silence is ending now. I can feel it in my bones. The same bones that once trembled in that kitchen when the latch clicked shut. I'm not that girl anymore. And I will never let her be forgotten again. The decision was made, but making it didn't make it easy. It's one thing to imagine telling your truth, to picture yourself standing tall, voice steady, words cutting through decades of denial like a blade through fabric. It's another thing entirely to think about the faces you'll see when you say it. I started thinking about my children first. Peter, my oldest, has always been the logical one. A fixer. The kind of man who hears a problem and immediately wants to solve it, even if the solution means paving over the truth so no one has to feel uncomfortable. I could already hear him. "Mom, what's done is done. Why stir up trouble now?" Then there's Elise, my second-born. My sensitive one. She feels things so deeply it can almost crush her. I worried that my words might break something in her. Or worse, that she'd break for me, and in doing so, carry my pain like it was her own. I don't want that for her. She's already had enough hardship in her life. The younger two, Caleb and Marcy, are wild cards. Caleb is loyal to a fault, but he can be stubborn. If he believes something or someone is worth defending, he'll dig his heels in even if the ground is crumbling beneath him. And Marcy? Well, Marcy inherited my mother's tendency to ignore anything that doesn't fit the picture she wants to see. I could see her crossing her arms, eyes narrowing, her voice going cool as she says, You must have misunderstood. But the hardest faces to imagine were the younger ones. My grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They've only ever known me as Grandma Belle. The one who bakes snickerdoodles, who knows exactly how much cinnamon to sprinkle into the hot chocolate, who claps the loudest at their school recitals. They've never known the girl I used to be. They've never known the girl who sat in the dark, praying for the sound of her father's truck in the driveway so she could feel safe again. And part of me wanted to keep it that way. But here's the truth I've come to understand. Silence doesn't protect innocence. Just leaves the next generation unprepared. If they don't know what danger looks like, they won't see it coming. And I will not leave this world having failed them the way I was failed. So I began to prepare. The first step was finding the diary. Not the box I kept under lock and key in the back of my closet. I already knew where that was. I mean truly finding it again in my heart. Allowing myself to read those pages without flinching, to face the 13-year-old girl who had written them. It wasn't easy. Some days I'd open it and get through half a page before my vision blurred, the words swimming on the paper. Other days I'd read whole sections, breathing through the ache in my chest, feeling the weight of every sentence. In those pages, my younger self is so polite, even when she's terrified. Warren looked at me strange today. He made me sit in the kitchen with him after supper. I didn't like it. As if putting the fear into small words would make it less real. As if making it smaller might make it disappear. But I also wrote things that still have the power to stop my breath. Things I never said out loud, not once in 70 years. Words that could set the whole house of cards tumbling. The second step was deciding how to gather them all without raising suspicion. I didn't want this to feel like an ambush, but I also didn't want anyone backing out. So I told them I wanted a family history night. I said I'd been going through old photo albums and wanted to share some stories before they were lost to time. Everyone liked that idea. No one questioned it. We set the date for the first Saturday in April. That gave me 2 weeks. 2 weeks to rehearse the words in my head, to anticipate every reaction. The disbelief, the shock, the tears, maybe even the anger. 2 weeks to shore up my own strength so I wouldn't falter when the moment came. I began talking to myself out loud when I was alone, practicing the sentences until they felt like they belonged to me. I didn't want to sound like I was reading from a script. I wanted my voice to carry the truth in a way that no one could ignore. I also made copies of the diary pages. Not all of them, just enough to prove I wasn't making this up now, in my old age. I knew there would be someone, maybe more than one, who would try to say my memory was faulty, that my recollection couldn't be trusted after so many decades. But the handwriting on those pages wasn't from an old woman. It was from a scared, determined 13-year-old girl. And no one could take that away from me. In those 2 weeks, my dreams became more vivid. Some nights I was back in my childhood kitchen, the air heavy with cigarette smoke and the faint smell of fried pork chops. I could hear Warren's boots on the linoleum, feel the weight of his presence before he even spoke. Other nights, I dreamed of the family gathering to come. Except in the dream, I opened my mouth to speak and no sound came out. The faces around me blurred, turned away, vanished. I would wake up gasping, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. But every morning I reminded myself, this isn't about me anymore. It's about them. It's about every girl who has ever been told to hush. It's about breaking the chain. The day of the gathering arrived with a sky the color of pewter. Rain tapped gently against the windows, not enough to keep anyone home, but enough to make the air feel heavier, like the world was holding its breath with me. I baked a peach cobbler that morning because I knew it would make the house smell warm and inviting. If I was going to shatter the illusion, I wanted it to happen in a space that felt safe, even as the truth fell like glass. One by one they arrived. Peter with his wife, carrying a stack of folding chairs. Elise, her arms full of grocery bags. insisting she'd bring the ice cream for the cobbler. Caleb and Marcy with their broods, the kids running straight for the cookie jar. The living room filled with chatter, laughter, the clink of dishes as everyone found a place to sit. I smiled and moved among them, refilling coffee cups, making sure everyone was comfortable. But inside my stomach was tight, my palms damp. I kept glancing toward the small wooden box on the side table, where the diary and the copies of the pages sat waiting. Finally, when the plates were cleared and the last crumbs of cobbler had been eaten, I stood. My knees wobbled, but I steadied myself on the back of my chair. "Before we start with the photos," I said, my voice carrying over the room, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I've never said to anyone in this family." Conversations stilled. All eyes turned toward me. I took a breath and reached for the box. My fingers brushed the smooth wood, and I could feel the heartbeat in my fingertips. "What I'm about to share is not easy," I said. "It's not a pleasant story, but it's one I've carried alone for 70 years, and I think it's time you all knew the truth about me, and about someone you've only ever heard good things about." The room was silent. You could hear the rain ticking against the windows. I opened the box, lifted out the diary, and held it up for them to see. "This," I said, "is my voice when I was 13 years old. And tonight you're going to hear it." I didn't look away. I wanted to see their faces as I spoke, because in just a few moments their picture of our family, and of me, was going to change forever. The weight of that little diary in my hands was almost unbearable. It was only a few ounces of paper and leather, but it felt like I was holding the sum of every breath I'd ever held in, every tear I'd ever swallowed, every scream I'd ever choked back down. For a moment no one spoke. My children, my grandchildren, they sat there looking at me, waiting for me to start talking about a funny family story or a little-known tidbit from my youth. They had no idea the floor under their feet was about to shift. I opened to the first page I had marked with a yellow sticky note. My handwriting from that year, small, tight, pressed hard into the paper, stared back at me. I ran my fingers over the indentations, remembering the way I used to grip my pencil until my hand cramped. Writing back then wasn't just an outlet. It was survival. It was proof to myself that I was real, that what happened wasn't a dream. I took a breath, steadying my voice. April 14, 1954. I began, reading directly from the page. "Warren told me to come inside after I finished feeding the chickens. He said we had to talk. But he didn't talk. He just looked. I don't like the way he looks at me now. I told him I needed to go finish my homework, but he stood in the doorway so I couldn't leave. I felt my stomach twist up. Felt small. Like if I made a sound the world would break. I wish Mama was here." Pause. I could feel the air in the room tighten. I didn't look up yet. Couldn't. Not yet. The next entry was dated only a few days later. April 17, 1954. It happened again. I don't know if I can write about it. My hands shake too much. He said no one would believe me. He said I'd ruin the family. He said if I told, there'd be nothing left for me here. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. My voice wavered, but I pressed on. Page after page I read. I read about the nights I couldn't sleep because I was afraid of hearing his footsteps in the hallway. I read about the Sunday mornings when he would greet neighbors at church with a firm handshake and a smile, while I sat in the pew feeling like my insides had been scraped out. Some entries were only a sentence long. June 2, 1954. I wish I could disappear. July 11, 1954. Mama told me to stop making up stories. I stopped talking after that. By the time I got to August of that year, my voice had steadied again. Not because it was easy, but because I was no longer speaking as that scared little girl. I was speaking as the woman who had survived her. Finally looked up. Peter's face was pale. His eyes were wide, unblinking. his hands gripping his knees like he was trying to anchor himself. Elise's cheeks were wet with silent tears. Caleb was shaking his head slowly, like he was trying to process something impossible. Marcy's arms were crossed, but her lips were pressed so tightly together that I could see the effort it was taking to hold back her words. The grandchildren, my sweet grandchildren, looked stunned. A few of them glanced at each other, then back at me, as if silently asking, "Is this real? Could this really have happened to Grandma?" I closed the diary, but I didn't put it away. I rested my hand on top of it like a promise. "I have carried this for 70 years, I said quietly. "And I have carried it alone. I was told it would destroy the family if I spoke. I was told no one would believe me. And for a long time I believed that myself. I believed I was safer in silence." I looked straight at Marcy then. "But silence doesn't keep anyone safe. It only protects the ones who hurt us." Her eyes flickered, but she didn't look away. I turned to the rest of them. "I'm telling you this now not because I need pity, and not because I want revenge. I'm telling you because this kind of thing doesn't just stop. Hides. It waits for the next girl who's been taught to be polite, to obey, to keep her mouth shut. And I will not leave this world knowing I stayed quiet and let the cycle keep spinning." The room was silent except for the rain outside. Finally Peter spoke. His voice was thick. "Mom, why didn't you tell us sooner?" I smiled sadly. "Because I was 13. Because the people I trusted told me not to. Because when I tried I was told I was lying. Because every time I looked at my mother's face, I saw the part of her that believed him instead of me. And because I didn't want you to look at me and see a victim instead of your mother." Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. And now, I said, "I want you to see me for exactly what I am. Not a victim. Not even just a survivor. I am someone who has carried a truth so heavy it nearly broke me. And I am strong enough to lay it down here, in front of all of you, and not be afraid of who picks it up." For a moment no one moved. Then Elise stood, walked over, and wrapped her arms around me. She was trembling, but her embrace was fierce. One by one, others followed. Peter, Caleb, even Marcy, who lingered for a long time with her arms crossed before finally taking a step toward me. The grandchildren came too. Some hugged me. Some just sat close, touching my arm or holding my hand, their young faces full of a sadness they didn't quite know how to name. I stayed there in that circle, feeling their warmth, knowing that even if some of them struggled to accept what they'd heard, the truth was out now. Could never be put back in the box. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone with the diary one last time. I didn't feel the need to hide it anymore. It wasn't a weapon I had to keep concealed. It wasn't a secret that would rot me from the inside out. It was simply a record of a life, of my life. I went to bed lighter than I'd felt in decades. And in the quiet darkness of my room, I whispered to the girl I used to be. "You made it." You told them. "You're free now."